An array is a variable that holds multiple values in it. It's sort of like a list of variables. We'll start off with an example. We'll say int array, making these square brackets makes this an array. So we say int array my int array equals new int array. And inside of these square brackets here, we're going to put how many elements we want in the array. So that'll be how many values we want to hold in this array. So we're going to put 5 values inside of it. So right now we have an integer array with 5 elements in it. An element is just a value in the array. Now we're going to put a value into the first element in the array. So we'll say my int array 0. So that'll be the 0th element. Sometimes we call it the first element. Sometimes we call it the 0th element. Essentially, arrays just start counting at 0 instead of counting at 1. So the 5 elements that we have right now are numbered 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So into the 0th element, we're going to put a value of 1000. And into the next element, we're going to put a value of 1500. So this int array is just like a list of integer values. And we'll populate the other 3 values in here. Element 3 will go 500. You can put whatever you want in here, it doesn't really matter. We're just filling up the array with values. So now we have an integer array that has been populated with these 5 values here. And now let's print one of these values to the screen. We'll print the last element in the array, which is my int array 4. So it's going to print 550 to the console. Next, we'll look at a different way to make this array that can be a little bit quicker sometimes. It's called using an array literal, which is just a fancy way of describing how we're going to make this array. So it's int array my int array equals, and then we're going to get rid of all this over here. And we're just going to put a set of curly braces and a semicolon. And inside of the curly braces, we're going to put the elements in the array. More specifically, the values that we want in the elements in the array. So we'll say my int array equals 1000, 1500, 27, 32, and 87. So now we have an int array called my int array, which has 5 elements in it, numbered 0 to 4. And these are the values that are inside each of those elements. So we could print out the value that's held in my int array 0. And we're going to get 1000 printed to the screen. Next, we'll make a string array. So we'll write string array my plants, and this array will hold our plants inside of it. And because we're dealing with strings, we have to enclose our values in the quotations. So we'll say element 1 is snake plant, element 2 is oyster plants, element 3 is cactus. So now we have a string array called my plants, which has 3 elements. The 0th element is snake plant, and then we have oyster plant and cactus. So if we print my plants, let's print element 1. If we print this to the screen, we're going to get oyster plant. And now let's add a couple more plants onto here. Let's put Ruby Glow Peperomia and Fantasy Venice. So now we have 5 elements in our array, and we're going to do something that you do all the time with arrays, which is using a for loop to cycle through the values in the array. So we're going to say for int I equals 0, And we want the for loop to keep going as long as I is less than the length of my plants. And to get the length of my plants, all we have to do is type the name of the array dot length, and that'll give us the length of it. And then we'll just say I plus plus so that I increments by 1 for each pass. And then we're just going to print out the value of each element in the array. So we'll say my plants, and then in the square brackets, we're going to put I. So for each pass of the loop, my plants I is going to be printed to the screen. So on the first pass, I is 0. So the 0th element in my plants will be printed to the screen, which is snake plant. And then on the next pass, I is going to increment by 1. So I will be 1. And then oyster plant is going to be printed to the screen, and then it'll cycle through the whole array. So we're going to get all 5 values printed to the console here. And we still have this print statement up here, so we actually got 6 values printed. If we get rid of that, then we'll just have our for loop printing all of the values in the array.